full, doesn't it? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good night. Late night. Any thickheads this morning? No more than usual. Yeah, no, that feeling. Building a registration site with Drupal. I'm not talking about registering users, obviously, but how you might use Drupal to create an event website or a site where people can register for activities, for memberships possibly, clubs, that kind of thing. And I've also put causes at the end as well, because it's, whilst you don't think of causes as being anything sort of event related or whatever, it's perfectly possible to register interest in a cause. And there are a variety of ways and means within the Drupal ecosystem to be able to achieve all of these things. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. My name is Paul Driver. I originally came across Drupal some 3-4 years ago. I have background going back some 20 years as an event organizer. For a long time I've been running these computer fairs, these weekend sort of computer sales events that you get in most large cities, or used to do before the bottom fell out of the market. And I looked to Drupal to help me create essentially an internal booking system where I could register traders who would buy tables, trestle tables on which to set up their wares. And I came along to Drupal at the beginning, really when sort of Drupal 7 was just coming out the gates, really, and a lot of the contributed modules weren't ready. And initially, for somebody like myself who's not a programmer, more of a sort of point-and-click sort of site builder type person, there weren't that many options. At the early stage, there was things like web form, for example, which was ready, where you just simply fill in a form and perhaps register interest in something like that. But then later on, as the contributed modules caught up, the many different options opened up for event registration. Now, first slide here, you registered to be here. Here we are at DrupalCamp in Yorkshire, and probably, unless you were one of the invited speakers, but probably you went through to the website, the Drupal Yorkshire website, the DrupalCamp website, and registered through the Eventbrite service to, and probably bought a ticket to be here, whether it was one of the early bird tickets or one of the full price tickets later on. So we all know what, we've all participated with event registration sites. So what's the purpose of an event registration site? Well, for the attendee, people like yourselves in the audience, it's obviously to get involved. There might be other reasons, but that's the primary motivation for registering here for this event. For the organizer, well, the motivation is to bring people together, whether that's for commercial or non-profit reasons, but typically to get people together either in a physical venue type environment like this, or maybe in an online environment, some sort of online ecosystem, whether it's a forum or a community site of one sort or another. For the organizer, in terms of a physical event like that, the motivations go on. It's about the allocation of seats. We had a capacity here of approximately 60 people for the Saturday at least, and we needed to be able to control these capacity values. We wanted to be able to deliver tickets via email delivery. We didn't need to do it here, but also in the case of many event websites, there might be a necessity to create waiting lists if you're oversubscribed. Also, a need to create programs, timetables, schedules, and with the DrupalCamp Yorkshire website, for example, one of the modules that we employed is a brand new module called the timetable module, and that's what you've seen on the website where we've published the schedule. For commercial, well, not necessarily for commercial, but there are also marketing and revenue collection considerations as well. And these are things that are common, really, to a great many event registration or activity registration websites of one sort or another. A lot of moving parts. if you think about all the things that need to be catered for, covered, we've got the registrants, attendees who might be different to the registrants. You might have a scenario where, take a school for example, where kids need to be registered for an after-school club. Well, the parent is the registrant, but the attendee is the child. They're not always the same individual. There might be a necessity to register speakers or VIPs, exhibitors, sponsors, entertainers, volunteers, contractors. There's also physical things such as the venue, location, attractions, the rooms, the spaces, workshops and so on. And in the context of any kind of website, and particularly in terms of Drupal, each of these different bases that need to be covered will probably be entities of one sort or another, whether they're content types or lighter weight entities, such as a registration booking, for example. And so, in actual fact, there's quite a lot required for an event registration website. There's quite a lot of bases that need covering and they need to be catered for. So, what's actually out there in terms of solutions to this? Well, there's a number of, separate to Drupal for a moment, there are a number of services we might call, things like meetup.com, things like Eventbrite, things like Ticketmaster, where you buy your concert tickets to go see whoever. In the case of DrupalCamp Yorkshire, we made use of the Eventbrite service, which is quite popular in the sort of Drupal community. It's often used for a lot of local user groups to register participants and so on. The good thing about Eventbrite is that if you're, as an organizer, if you're organising a free entry event, and it's actually free to use Eventbrite, it's what we call a freemium service. They do charge if you want to sell actual tickets. So in the case here of DrupalCamp, where we had early bird tickets for sale and then the full price tickets for sale, there's a transaction taking place, a credit card transaction. As you probably know, where that takes place is always a percentage skimmed off by the banks. Eventbrite need to make their bit as well. And so, broadly speaking, there's a 6% charge made on a ticket sale through Eventbrite. So that's split. I think it's 2.5% for the credit card commission and 3.5% as the bit that goes to Eventbrite. In addition to that, they charge an additional sort of booking fee of 65p per ticket. So, if you're involved in organising a camp or any kind of activity or registration, Eventbrite is certainly an option to consider. You don't even need to build a website. You can just create an Eventbrite page and use that as your activity or event registration site. Publish the URL for it, and you don't need to do anything more. There is, however, a module which provides an integration with the Eventbrite API, which allows you to use Eventbrite with a Drupal site. I haven't used it personally, but it seems to be fairly well developed. It seems to have a fair bit of traction in terms of user base and relatively well supported from what I know. What about native Drupal? How can you do events and registrations, clubs and memberships through a Drupal site? Well, there's actually a great many different ways. In terms of solutions that are sort of ready out of the box, as you say, there's a number of distributions that go well with events. The one that many people will be familiar with is COD, the Conference Organising Distribution. This is one that is used, certainly as far as I'm aware, for all of the major Drupal cons, and for quite a great many camps as well. I'm not sure how widely it's used for general sort of conference organisation out of the Drupal world, but that distribution is put together to handle a great many of these bases that I mentioned here in terms of registrants, attendees, speakers, programs, and there's everything that you need in COD to create an event registration site. Drupal Commons is another distribution, which I think it's actually Atrium, which is the company that sort of managed the Drupal Commons distribution. That's a sort of a social networking, organic groups type distribution for creating online communities. But you've also got a component of that Drupal Commons events. which caters for event registration. And again, this works pretty much as soon as you've installed it, it's ready to go. So you can do event registration with that. Open Atrium is another distribution. It's a very heavyweight distribution. Is Open Atrium. It's designed principally for as a ready-built sort of intranet type solution. Again, based sort of a bedrock of organic groups in terms of being able to create spaces within an intranet or within an Open Atrium site. And again, there are provisions for event registration within Open Atrium. A new distribution, one that's brand new out of the block, is called Crm. And this has been put together by, I think Alex Burrows was one of them who was talking to us yesterday, and another chap, Jay Codim, I think I've got the name right. Crm has been put together specifically for organising Drupal camps, and a component of Crm is the timetable module that I mentioned yesterday. Sorry, that I mentioned earlier in the talk for doing programs. Crm's is being conceived to be, I suppose, a lightweight version of COD, and the maintainers are hoping it provides quite a lot of functionality that COD doesn't have. But that's another project which is very much under development at the moment, but parts of it are ready to use as we've been using with the DrupalCamp here. Open Enterprise is another distribution which has got an event registration component. Panoply, which is a panels distribution, also has an event module. So all of these, and I'm sure there are others as well, if you want the registration site of some sort or another, you can roll out with a distribution and have something pretty much ready built for you. We've then got the CRM systems. Customer relationship management is the definition normally of CRM, but I think it could be client relationship management, or you could probably use the abbreviation for other things. And a CRM system in the context of Drupal is, let's just take a backtrack a moment. Drupal, in terms of users, it normally has registered users, where all the participants within a site have an account, have a username and a login on the site of various different sort of levels of permission. But sometimes you or an organisation has a great deal of contacts. You might be building a site for a non-profit, for example, and you might have a large contact database, for example, of beneficiaries. Well, these are all organisations or individuals that are associated, but not necessarily full-scale users on the site. So it's almost like a contact database. And there are a number of CRM systems for Drupal. Civic CRM is a CRM in its own right, and there's an integration with Drupal, and that's the sort of thing that an existing CRM system is sort of bolted onto Drupal. And then there are a couple, well, at least two, native Drupal CRM systems. When I say native Drupal, they're not third-party systems which integrations have been provided for, but they're based on the field API. So, for example, in Red Hen, you can create a contact record just as you can with any kind of content type, for example, and then you can add fields to build database records for contacts. Open CRM does much the same thing. And the difference between the two, I think the sort of intended audience for Red Hen is more of the developer type Drupal user. Open CRM is based more of the sort of site builder, point-and-click type user, but they aim to achieve the same sorts of things. And again, these solutions also have event management options that you can use to register people for activities or events. So in terms of modules, you've got a few different options, and I'm sure this list that I've done here isn't exhaustive. You've got sign up, you've got entity registration, no registrations, Drupal Commerce, web form, Eventbrite, which we've mentioned. There's an emerging module at the moment called the ticket module. And these are all individual modules that can be used for event registration sites. And it's fair to say, actually, that many of these modules that are here in this list are actually make up the registration components of some of these distributions and CRM systems that I mentioned in the previous slide. just to take you through them for a while, historically the one that's been around the longest, I suppose, is Sign Up, which was, I think, originally a Drupal 6 module. It may go back before, but it's since been ported to Drupal 7. Entity registration is, I've underlined because I'm going to talk a little bit about that, is probably at the moment the module that's got the most traction and the biggest user base for creating a registration site. A very similar module to entity registration is node registrations. Now these first three work like this. They're based on creating a content type or an entity, so that might be an event, and then being able to associate registrations with that node, with that entity, with that event. So in effect, the registration element is a field that you can append, that you can attach to your content type or entity that is the event. I put Drupal Commons in there as well because Drupal Commons exists to process transactions, and an event registration is a transaction, whether money changes hands or not. It's very flexible, is Drupal Commons. You've got the rules mechanism there, which allows a great deal of possibility. You've got stock control, which is a way of handling capacity. So if you've got 30 seats, it's just like 30, well, once they're sold, the seats are gone. So Drupal Commons is a perfectly valid system. Granted, you might say a little overweight because of the underlying power that it's got and everything else that it can do, but it can certainly be used for event registration. Web form, again, can be, if you just need a form where people need to fill in to apply for participation, and if your event doesn't need anything more complicated, then web form can be a perfectly realistic option. It's possible to combine web form with Drupal Commons. In actual fact, if you just do a search on Google for that, there's a tutorial by Mustard Seed Media, Bob from Mustard Seed Media, who takes you through how to create a simple registration site using web form and Drupal Commons. Eventbrite we talked about. The ticket module is emerging. It's very new. I don't know a great deal about it at the moment, but it looks quite promising. It's certainly something I'm going to be looking into. So I'm going to talk today mainly about entity registration module. The reason being, this is the one I'm most familiar about, or most familiar with. I don't know much about the other modules that we've been looking at here. And I've just copied here the first paragraph from the project page on Drupal.org. Entity registration is a simple, flexible module for allowing and tracking user registrants for events or just about anything that you may want people to sign up for. Just going back to this notion of registration, we generally talk about registration as being to do with events, and events you tend to think of as being things that have a date, a start time and an end time perhaps. Well, it doesn't need a date, and one of the things about entity registration module is that it's got very few dependencies. In other words, it can work pretty much by itself. It doesn't need a great deal of additional modules to make it tick. All that's needed in reality for entity registration, so for it to work, is the entity API, in fact. Optionally, you can use views as well, which would be very useful. You probably would in most instances use views. As we say here, there's absolutely no requirement to attach a date to a registration entity, which makes it perfectly feasible. And the maintainers of the module are very, very clear in their intentions about this, because they think, well, registration isn't just about events, it isn't just about activities. Which brings me on to this idea, you could just register for a book club, for example. That doesn't need to be a dated thing. You might want to register your support for a cause of some kind, an expression of interest. All registration options, really. Entity registration is a very popular module. Just give you a little bit of background about it. The main authors, maintainers are a boutique web design shop called ThinkChat. They're based in Portland in the States. They're respected in the Drupal community. They've done quite a lot in terms of on the contrib side of things, very active developers. They're responsible for the Red Hen CRM suite that I mentioned earlier on. A lot of you will be familiar with Mailchimp as an email broadcasting service. Well, I understand that the people that think Shout are actually sponsored by Mailchimp to maintain the Mailchimp module for Drupal, which is very, very widely used. And they've also worked on the Salesforce suite integration as well, which I don't know a great deal about personally, only to say that Salesforce has been around a long time and commercially speaking is a very, very important organisation, widely used by a lot of really big organisations, which is a good integration option for Drupal. Entity registration, as I said earlier on, is well, amongst others, but it's the registration module that's used for many of the distributions that I've talked about, most notably Drupal Commons. It was used for COD, the conference organising distribution. That's very recently switched over to using the ticket module, which again has sort of scratched an itch for me in terms of they've obviously chosen it for really valid reasons that I ought to sort of look into and find out more about. I'm quite interested to know more about the ticket module. Entity registration it's a popular module, well documented, it's well supported, it's got an active project page and issue queue on Drupal.org. When I checked it yesterday or the day before, it had over 5,760 installations, which, as far as Drupal modules goes, is that's pretty popular. I'm not sure how they actually count and register these, because I'm sure there must be very many more really. So I'm going to give you a quick look now at how entity registration module works, and before moving into a demo. There's really 4 stages to using the entity registration module and having your site ready to be able to accept registrations for an activity or an event. The first thing that you do is you have to define a registration type. This is in Drupal terms, this is an entity, a bundle. And a registration type normally captures information about the registrant. In other words, the participant, the person that is registering. And because it's a fieldable entity, it means that you can attach additional fields to the registration type. So the default base fields on the registration type are literally the username, if they've got a Drupal, if they've got an account on your Drupal site, or the email address, because it isn't necessary with entity registration for the registered user, for the participant, the attendee, to be a registered user. It can be identified by their email address. So it's just got 2 fields as the base installation, but then you can, because it's a fieldable entity, you can add as many additional fields to that as you want. So you might have first name, last name, address, organisation, company, phone number, as information that people need to register when they're input when they're registering. And this information would be added to the registration type. The second thing that you need to do then is to create a content. Well, I'll just give you an example of the fieldable entity. I'll give you the example that's given on the project page is that you might want to, for example, get people to enter their shoe size if you're doing people for temping bowling, so that you can have the shoes ready for them. In terms of the what you then do is you create a content type for your activity, and the content type you would include fields which are principally about the activity or the event. So if we're talking about an event, one of the fields that would be attached to the content type there would be something like the date field, for example. It might be the venue, the location, the time. Other values that you would need, or that you may need to attach to the content type, would be the registration settings, or, for example, the capacity. We've got 30 seats for this event, for example. And registration module, entity registration, will monitor your registrations, and if you get to a point where you've got 30 registrations, and that's your capacity, it'll then say, right, the event's now closed for registrations before. Although there is an option with a sub-module to start a waiting list, if you want to be able to do that. And the waiting list is quite clever, because somebody cancels if somebody cancels their registration, then somebody from the waiting list is promoted and is registered for the event. It's very self-contained. We'll see in the demonstration that once you put these elements together, you have content type that is ready to start taking registrations. As I mentioned earlier on, who can register with entity registration? Well, pretty much anybody, the logged-in user or any other registered user, or any person defined by a unique email address. Control capacity limits. You can schedule reminders. So natively built into entity registration, you could say, you could create an email template, for example, which is automatically fired out to people, say 5 days before an event, to remind them of the event, the activity that they have registered for. It's also possible, whilst there's no dependency on the date module, there is some date functionality built in that you can schedule opening dates and closing dates for registration. So, for example, you might want to say that people won't be able to register for the event until 5 days before, for example, and that the closing date might be 24 hours before the event is due to start. You can take the module a great deal further by additional third-party modules. There is a registration date module which gives you additional date functionality, just as I've been talking about a moment ago about being able to create opening and closing dates. Well, the registration date module allows you to use offsets, so that, for example, if you want an event to open for registrations 5 days before a date that's already attached to the content type, it'll pick up on any attached date and work off that as being the opening and the closing date, rather than manually putting a date in. It's possible to integrate this with Drupal Commerce, and there are 2 different modules for Drupal Commerce: Commerce Registration and Registration Commerce, which gets a bit confusing. But they're just different workflows. Commerce Registration doesn't actually confirm a registration until a payment is made. Registration Commerce allows a registration to be created, but for payment to follow at some point afterwards. So there are use cases for both of those. By using field collections, and I'll demonstrate this in a moment, but using the field collection module, it makes it possible to collect a great deal more information about your participants, and especially useful if you've got multiple participants in one registration. Not really anything to do with the entity registration module, but I thought I'd put this in here anyway. You've also got, with some third-party modules, the opportunity for creating repeating dates. I won't dwell on that too much. I'll put that in at the end of the demonstration, just as an aside, really, because it's not really connected. But as an event organiser myself, for example, run computer fairs every Sunday. Often it's at the same venue. And for me, it's a big time saver to be able to say, you know, create a computer fair every Sunday for the next 10 weeks. And with repeating dates, it's possible to do that. There's a difference, however. The date module and the not so much the calendar module, but the date module in particular, has the facility already built into it to create repeating dates. But it doesn't create multiple content types. So, for example, your event might be one content type with repeating dates, but it's only the dates that repeat. If you're wanting to collect any additional information, you actually need separate dated nodes, because it doesn't follow that you're going to have the same registrants for every single instance. So you actually need multiple nodes creating if you're going to collect registrations, because these will have different, potentially could have different participants. So, running through some demonstrations. Sorry, it's just been a bit PowerPoint so far, and hopefully it'll all start to make sense here as I run you through a couple of demonstrations. We're going to do you, time allows, I'll do 3. The basic installation I'm going to show, which hopefully will illustrate that within literally a few minutes of installing this, you can have something up and running on your site that's ready to take registrations for an activity or an event. As I say, I originally came to Drupal because I was looking for something for my internal booking system to book traders in for a computer fair. So I've got an example I can show you there as well. And more recently, I've done quite a lot of work with non-profits and schools who have wanted registration systems for out-of-school events. And this is one of these scenarios where actually the entity registration module, as it stands, needs additional work doing to it, because it's one of these scenarios where a parent might be creating a registration on behalf of their children. In other words, the parent is the registrant and the child is the attendee. A lot of these children are very young. Some of them are in nappies. They don't have email addresses, and they don't have accounts on the host Drupal system. So it's necessary for a third party, the parent, to create a registration. So I'll give you a demonstration as to how I built that. So here we've got a basic Drupal install, Arctic theme, pretty much Drupal out of the box. And I've created here a simple activity, a cake baking club. This cake baking club is just something really for membership, I suppose. It doesn't have a date, it's not happening on a particular time. You can register for the cake baking club, it's as simple as that. And I'll give you a quick demonstration, first of all, of the finished article, as it were, and what you get from the entity registration module, and then I'll unpick it and show you how you build it together. So I'm logged in, but that doesn't matter. I can still register for this, even though I'm the logged in administrator. And you can see, as we're looking at the page here, we've got a few tabs here. Now, what I will say about the entity registration module is that it's got quite an in-depth permissions structure to it, in that you can, for example, you can have it so that a person can't register other people, can only register themselves, for example. As is typical for another sort of Drupal permissions type structure. And that might control the visibility of these tabs, depending upon what permissions you've got. I've got the administrator permission here, so I can register, but I can also manage registrations. And so if I come to the site, I want to get involved with some cakes, I want to register for the cake baking club. Well, in this instance, I'm a logged in user, okay? So all I need to do is click register. The administrator here, so it has to be who do I want to register. I want to register myself. I've got here other account or other person as defined by an email address. I'm just going to register myself. Click save registration. Here's a quick summary of the registration that I've just made. I now click back on the Cake Baking Club and go to Manage Registrations. I can see here is a list of the people that have registered for the Cake Baking Club. That really is it. Click the button to register, and a registration is created. All of this is built into the registration module. Everything that you're seeing here works out of the box. You don't need any additional modules apart from the entity API, which I described as being pretty much the only dependency. As an administrator here, just put my administrator back on rather than my registrant hat back on. I've got a view to the settings, got access to the settings. And again, based on the permission structure, that may or may not be, well, we don't be there for the administrator really, the event administrator. So I'll just shut these tabs up quickly because it's a little easier to view them. The main setting that you can see you've got here is the capacity. So for this, the Cake Baking Club, I've set a capacity of 30 here. It'll take 30 registrations before it says we're full. I've got the scheduling option. So if I want to define an opening date and a closing date for registrations, I can do just by putting a date in there of the correct format. I can schedule reminders. So I would specify a reminder date. And here I can specify the template for my email. The email template accepts tokens, so you can use tokens to introduce the name of the person, perhaps the date of the event, anything that's in the any field really that's gone into your content type can be put into I suppose, a customised email.
Was there any integration with Mailchimp?
You know what, I don't know. But it's come out of the same stable, and I'd be surprised if there wasn't. Yeah. I don't know, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't. I'm quite sure help would be there if, you know, if you wanted to post something to the issue. I found them to be quite a helpful bunch, good at supporting the module and answering questions and so on. You know. The other setting value that you've got there is additional settings. So the number of spaces allowed, for example. So you might want to create a restriction on how many slots, how many spaces somebody can register. I'm going to set one here. You might have a situation where you can allow multiple registrations. Okay. Now, why might you have multiple registrations? Well, you might be, for example, an administrator within a company registering a load of reps to attend a conference. So the multiple registrations might represent each named attendee. So that's certainly one example of multiple registrations. And then just a couple of configuration things here, the from address, from the email address, and so on. So out of the box, entity registration will allow you to sign up for an activity or an event. It allows the administrator these, you know, fairly sophisticated tools there to get you up and running quickly. And you've also got an email broadcast option here. Now, whether there's any integration here with Mailchimp, I'm not sure. But if you want to be able to just send on demand an email to all of your registrants, you can do. And again, support tokens. So, it's a basic demonstration. Let me just show you quickly how this is put together. I'm just going to sit down here so I can drive my laptop properly. Unplug something. Okay. And I'm just going to really unpick quickly this particular build. So I said there's essentially 2 or 3 stages to doing it. The first of which is creating the registration type. Just alter the hangout there. Open it up a bit. Now you find this under. I'm not going to go through the basics of it. I'm assuming that perhaps I shouldn't, but I'll make the assumption, if you'll forgive me, that you know how to go about installing a module for a Drupal site. If you're just getting started, please forgive me for that, but it's easy enough information to find in the Drupal documentation. Many video tutorials explain how to do that, and it's not difficult at all. So assuming that the entity registration module is installed, you'll find the registration types under structure. And here you've got the registration option. Click on there, you've got registration states, which I haven't talked about, and you've got registration types. Registrations, just briefly, you might have a state of a registration. You might want to define a state of a registration where, for example, a registration might be pending or a registration might be completed. And that's what registration states are for. I won't dwell on that, they're pretty straightforward. Registrations types, and I'm just going to delete one here. I'm going to delete the simple registration type and then rebuild it. So we've already got a basic registration type in there, which is what I had for my cake baking club. I'm just going to recreate that really, but I'll give it a different name. The point is with this, you can have multiple registration types. Okay, so you might have a registration type for speakers. You might have a registration type for conference attendees. You might have a different registration type for contractors, for example. So you can build up different, well, you'll see this in a moment. You can attach fields to each of these registration types. So just give it a label. Just flip back a moment. The last one's called basic. I'll call this a simple registration type. And then we've created it. If I just go to manage the fields here, and well, look at edit. There's nothing there in edit apart from what I've just entered. Go to manage the fields. You see that the module itself has defined 2 fields. The email address. I'm just going to zoom this in so that for anybody at the back that maybe can't see that too well. That better? Yeah. So it's defined an email address and it's defined a registrant, so in other words, the registered user. And that's all you need to create a basic registration. I could add additional fields here now if I wanted. So going back to the bowling club example for the 10-pin bowling event, if I wanted to put shoe size in here, I could then go and say to divide an integer, or probably easiest just with a straight text field. But I could collect from my registrants their shoe size when they make their registrations. Okay, so that's all there is to creating a registration type. You then need to create a content type. So I've got an activity content type there. I'm going to create a new content type for the sake of illustrating this example. Structure, content types, and okay, we had activity. I'm going to create a content type called event. Just looking at publishing settings here, it's just like any other content type. I'm going to remove the author, I'm going to remove comments because I don't need that for this particular content type, and I'll leave it so you can add it to the menu. Save that content type. So here now I've got a new content type called an event. What I will then need to do then is manage my fields. The content type has a title and a body, as any basic content type has, but I'm going to add another field here called register. If I go to my field types now, we can see that the module has introduced a field type called a registration. I'm going to select that and select save. Save the field settings there. I'm not going to make it mandatory, but there is my register field type attached to the event content type. If we go to this section here, allows me now to create some default registration settings. So first of all, I'm going to enable registrations for this event. I'm going to say that my events have a default capacity of 30. I'm not going to define an opening date and a closing date, nor a reminder. I'm going to say that you're only allowed to book one slot and that you're not allowed to make multiple registrations. Then we get to the default value for the registration type. What registration type do I want to associate with this event content type? I'm going to associate the simple registration type that we created a few moments ago. I'm going to click Save, close my content type creation wizard. I'm going to add new content, and now I've got the option to add an event. Perhaps if I had more time for an example, I would have included a date field on the event, but we're just going to say that this is a non-dated event. This event is the sponsored walk around Yorkshire. It might take a little time. I can't spell this morning. Okay, so just like any content type there, I'm creating some information about the event, a title, body. I'm going to add a menu link there, and I'm just going to go and create my event. And there it is. So I'll just reload that to get rid of the error messages there. So now I can register for this event if I wish. Click on register, and there I've got the option to register myself, another account, or another person. If I wasn't logged in, if I wasn't had an account, and depending upon how I'd set up the permissions, it might be that the only type of registration that you could make is somebody that's got an email address. It might be that there's no requirement for anybody to have an account on the system. Just do a quick backtrack there at the moment. There's just one thing I forgot to do. In the display properties of the content type for the event, I go to manage display. I've got an option here for how people want to register. The default behavior is to provide a tab. Let's say I want to create a link which starting with some CSS might create a button. If I do a registration link, give it a label of register, save, close, update my content type, and it's zoom back. My link is now a register button that's attached to the content. So now I've got in really just a very short period of time, I've created a registration type which can collect information about the registrant. I've created a content type which can present information about the activity or the event, and then we've provided a facility for people to go ahead and register straight away for the event, register myself, save the registration, go back to the sponsored walk thing. If I want to now look to manage the registrations as the administrator, and there you can see the registration that I've just made. The data that it keeps natively here is pretty straightforward. It's just literally email address, the username. I'll show you in a moment how you can use registration views to present a great deal more information. But that, in a nutshell, is the basic system. Speaking with Ruth last night, is she with us today? Yeah, Ruth. We're in the bar last night. I was chatting with Ruth, and Ruth has also made use of the event registration website, and this was for a church group who were running a holiday group, a kids' holiday group, and this is the Cherry Hinton Baptist Church. And again, this has made use of entity registration, but there's rather more data being collected here about the registrants. In this instance, they only wanted the email, the church only wanted the email address of the registrant. They wanted the parent name, a contact phone number, a home address, a doctor's phone number just in case, and then they wanted to collect information about the registrant. I guess you did that through field collections, this part here?
The children bit is a field collection.
Right, okay. So sorry, I've just clicked the wrong button there. Okay, so this information here is built into the registration type.
Yeah.
Okay, now the field collection, I'll move on to that in a moment. This is a more advanced technique where you can create a collection of fields about the participants. So you get an inline field collection which can be used to collect additional information. And this is where entity registrations can start to become pretty powerful. Now that's this form here is what the organisation wanted, the church. And they actually, whilst they're collecting quite a bit of potentially sensitive information, they also wanted the facility to pretty much delete it as soon as it was collected. They didn't want any information to be hanging around the system for too long afterwards about that. So I thought that was an interesting way of using the module. An alternative but very similar application here is that I was approached recently by an organisation called Selfa, skipped an extended learning for, I forgot what the A is actually, skipped in. What Selfa do is that they provide out-of-school care and holiday clubs for disadvantaged and vulnerable kids. These might be in support of working parents who need before-school care and after-school care, holiday clubs, that sort of thing. Now, I was asked to put a registration system together here where we wanted to make it really, really simple. So the application here was, we wanted parents to be able to, well, it isn't just parents actually, because it could be social workers, for example, care professionals, education professionals who have responsibility for kids and might book kids onto courses and clubs and that sort of thing. We wanted to make it really, really simple to use. So this is an example here of how we get around this requirement for entity registration to the participants to have an account or an email address. As I say, some of these young kids might still be in nappies, literally. So, parent comes along and registers an account on the site. The type of site it is, the organisation wants to vet the registrations, first of all, to verify that the registrant is indeed a parent or a care professional, an education professional. So when people have registered, they've got very limited permissions, but once they've been approved, we allow them to create one particular type of content, and the content type that we created is a child. And I'll just show you how to do it, for example. So I'm already logged into this. I'm just using the masquerade module here. I'm logged in and out as a parent, and if I just go to my online bookings here, you see I have some children here. Let's say I want to add another child. Click the Add Another Child button. Now what's actually taking place here is I've got permission as a parent to create a content type of a child. And it's just a very simple thing. All we're capturing on the system here is a first name, Tom White, first name, last name, gender, boy, date of birth. Let's give him a date of birth. That's all I'm going to put. Now, for the system like this, there were certain security permission considerations. We didn't want too much in-depth information about the child, so we're literally just creating first name and last name. It's pretty much public information anyway, really. But that's all we need to identify the child as the attendee. We just need to know who they are. Click Submit, and now, as this particular parent, I've just created another content type, so I now have 4 children. If I go to the event calendar here, we've got all sorts of things going on for calendars, upcoming list views of upcoming events. Using the calendar module, we've got calendar type views and so on. Very flexible what you can do with the date module. Let's say that I want to go ahead and register my kids for this sport club that's taking place on Monday. Click on here to register, and it says, whoa, registrations for this activity are closed. The button's still there actually. I understand there's in version 1.3 of entity registration. This is a bug actually which has been resolved in the latest version where the register link is not displayed if registrations are closed. Well, why registrations closed is because I've set a default value in the settings that registrations close 2 days before an event. Okay, so that's why they're closed. But if I go look forward to Saturday the 7th of June, next week, I can see, well, I've already registered for this, and it's showing me there. I can go view my registration. I can see that I've already registered 3 kids for this. Let's just find an event that I haven't registered for yet. The thing is with these holiday clubs, I wanted to make the form filling very easily. If it's like a before school club, it's quite feasible that somebody might want to put their child in before school club every morning. You don't want to force a situation of having to fill in 5 long-winded forms just to book 5 slots on a club. So here we go, registrations for this activity are open. Click the register button. There's a bit of information here. I can put whatever information I wanted about this, images, additional information, it's fieldable. Click register. I'm logged in, I'm going to book 4 spaces. I'm going to click on attendees, and what I've got here, I'm going to book a space for Billy, Wendy, Bobby, and Tom. Click Save Registration, and it's done. There's no long-winded form filling. I want to view my registration. It's telling me that I've already registered here. I want to view my registration. Just click on there. There's my registration. I need to change it. Tom's going off to a birthday party instead. All I'm doing really is changing the capacity, changing the number of spaces that I've registered. The names are just appended to the booking, really. Click Update, and that's now altered my registration. So as the parent, I'm able to control all of these registrations. Through using registration views, what the registration views is a submodule to the registration entity registration module. It's not compulsory. It's there as a helper, third-party helper module. But this exposes quite a lot of the registration fields to the views module. And if I click here on what I call online bookings, I can see as a parent what registrations I have in the system currently. I can see how many slots I've got booked for each registration. I'm just going to switch here, so there we've got a really simple situation where I'm able to register a third party, in other words my child. Just to explain how we did the some of the UI stuff here. Just delete my registration here for a moment. So delete the entire registration. The UI is very easy to use here, and nice and simple, and very little form filling. What we've done is that we've created a field collection, which is based on an entity reference, which is bringing, and what this is referencing is the content types that I have created of the child type. Okay, that's filtered in a view based on me being the author of that content type. So there's no special relationship integration here gone on. I've just filtered the view based on show me the child content types that I, as the author, have created. Well, I've only created 4, and they represent my 4 kids. Okay, so there's nothing particularly complicated going on there in terms of filtering. It's quite simply done. I then used the, this ordinarily would be, if you can imagine adding a field where you've got unlimited cardinality. Just to explain what that means, I might add a field where I can have limited values. These might be each of my children, for example. Now, in Drupal out of the box, that would collect that would create a select form where you could select multiple values, one child or all 4 values. But here I'm using the chosen module, which allows this kind of a searchable drop-down list, where I can click on there and it's added 1 selection, 2 selections, 3 selections. Very easy to use. Click Save, job done. Now, using Masquerade, I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm going to stop. By the way, Masquerade module, if you don't know, is a great little tool which allows you as a site builder, really, or as an administrator, to masquerade either as another user or as another role. I've got this set up, so I've got a number of different users that are set up on this system, and I've just been masquerading as parent number 1 there. I'm the administrator. I'm just going to masquerade as the site editor here. So this has got a different level of permissions here. I've got it set up with Workbench. Just click out of there. Now, as the administrator, sorry, as the editor of the charity organisation here, yes, it's useful, and what I want is for parents to register their own kids. But there's always going to be the instance where a parent phones up and says, "Listen, I'm nowhere near my computer, or I've lost my phone. Can I book Tommy in for a club this afternoon?" So we need also the facility for the site owner to add participants. Now the site owner hasn't got the kids; he doesn't own the kids, so we need a different level of permission here. And also, if you had a situation where the default settings of the registration module only permitted, say, 1 registration, well, you want the site administrator to not be dictated to by that permission and to be able to potentially create multiple registrations. So I'm logged in as the site owner now, the site editor. If I click on register here, I've got some different tools. For a start, my entity reference view here is showing all the kids on the system, not just my kids. I did it like this because it's quite possible that actually the manager of the system or somebody that has permission to use the system could also have their own children participating. So they might be a parent and they might also be a site owner. But here, there's a different level of permissions, and as the site owner, I can register any child for the system. I can either attend unregistered people. So I get a call from a parent saying, "Billy's come along, but she's got a friend who's visiting. It's her cousin. Can she come along to the club as well? She's not on the system." "Yes, sure. What's her name?" "Her name's Sue." So I can register Sue as an unregistered attendee and append that to the system as well. So I can create the registration here now. And as the site owner, I've now registered kids for the system as well. So let's just look now at some of the admin tools here. if I go up to registrations, here I've got a bird's eye view using the views registration module of all of the activities that are on the system. And here I've done this with some repeating dates, so there's quite a few sessions of different types that are registered. And if I have a look at this particular event, Disability Rocks, I think this is a day out at Brimon Rocks, which is a tourist attraction here in Yorkshire. It's a lovely bit of countryside up in North Yorkshire. There at Disability Rocks, I can see that I've got a capacity of 30. I can see that there's 3 reservations and that there are 27 remaining places. And if I now want to click View Registrations, this gives me a document that's really ready to print out, showing who the registrants are and who the attendees are. So I can have a situation here where various different parents are registering for the events. I don't need to do any paperwork. The organisations I'm dealing with at the moment are doing all of this on paper. They're getting parents to fill in a form for each and every activity that they want the kids to register for. So a form for Monday, a form for Tuesday, a form for Wednesday. They've then got to take all of that information and they've got to transfer that manually into a register so that they can give to the leader of a given session and say, this is who's coming today. But with this system, parents do all of the registrations, and it creates a situation where I can then just print that out, and there's a full list of who wants to attend that event. So that's my take on activity registrations using the event registration module in particular. I hope I've given you a bit of an overview as well of the many other different ways using Drupal that you can create activity or event registrations type type systems for a Drupal site. Thank you very much. Any questions, I suppose? Yes, there is. You can. There are 2 Drupal Commerce integrations, two separate Drupal Commerce modules that can integrate with entity registration. One of them is called Commerce Registration, and the other is called Registration Commerce, or sometimes called Commerce Registration 2. Both of these allow you to attach a price to a slot or a seat, and both of them allow you to require payment before a registration is fully confirmed. The reason there's 2 modules is you've got slightly different workflows. The first module requires payment before a registration is created. The second module allows you to register first but pay later. And so, yes, it can be done. I would say of the 2, the second one, Commerce Registration Commerce, I think is probably the one that's a bit more rounded and useful, in my opinion. Yes, and that's a easy question.
Just a quick question. If you send out mail outs, are you able to get things which then put things in calendars, like iCal or Google registration?
You would be able to do that with Mailchimp, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you just need to I'm going to say yes, you can. I haven't done it myself, but the reason I'm saying that with some confidence is that the mechanism that we've got here for generating emails to email the registrants or in the automatic reminder, that's fully configurable there. So here we've got the token browser lists. Now, if I had a date field in here, certainly I could pick a token representing the date of the node. And I'm quite sure that if you were using something like the iCal module, that also would generate a token. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it would. But even if it didn't, you could probably form your own URL based on a combination of tokens and values that you need to create an iCal link. I'm sure you could do that.
You generate an email when they register, or do you have to just manually send an email?
No, it doesn't generate, by default, it doesn't generate an email when you register. Now, you might think that's an oversight. I would suggest it isn't. The maintainers, the authors of this module, are really, really keen that it should have as few dependencies as possible. Now, it might be that there's absolutely no need to create an email registration, so they're probably working for that use case. But as you know, through rules, for example, and potentially through quite a number of other modules, I'm sure you could, without any difficulty, create an email. Have you got something to add to that, Ruth?
Well, I was just going to say there is rules integration, which then
yes, there is. Yeah.
an email really easily. I mean, there is no.
There's rules integration for the registration module, isn't there? So yeah, there will be a rules command. You know, when a registration is created, send an email.
That's exactly what I do. So
right.
For my ones, whenever I send out the whenever I receive a registration for something, I then email back to the event organizer and to the person saying that that's.
Yeah. I should just say, I mean, I'm a site builder. I don't know a single line of code. I cannot write a single string PHP, not one. And all of this is doable with modules, point and click, no drush or anything. Yes?
Just before you mentioned it, you had me thinking, Paul, about expressions of interest.
Yes.
Quite interesting that would be.
Right.
I just wonder an advantage that this would give you is that you would have the data in the end, whereas if you use meetups, they've got that.
Sorry to interrupt. We need to finish this. They've already started the next one.
Oh, right, okay.
So if anyone wants to get in on that one.
Right, no problem. Yes, indeed. You own your own data, for sure. You're not relying, it's not going into a third-party system that you can't get it out of.
I wonder about data protection.
Right.
Do you rely on...
Well, data protection in the UK, if you're doing anything, you need a license, strictly speaking. A lot of us don't. It's £40 a year, it's just a tax.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers.
Okay. I can field any more questions outside if anybody's got any. Sorry, that went longer than I thought I did.